Good morning, everybody. As you know, I like to try out all sorts of different unique and interesting character builds on this channel to try to see what works and what doesn't, and just test out so many different things. However, sometimes it's important to go back and revisit to retest different concepts that I'd already used in the past, especially if they've changed a lot over time. I have a whole bunch of build guides that I do my best to keep up to date, as well as just some general builds that are kind of quickly thrown together that I kind of just leave as a relic of the time in which they were written. But some of the fully featured build guides, I want to make sure they're up to date, so that way, if people see them, there's way more information in there about what it is you need or what the most important things are. So I just want to make sure that those things get to be preserved as best as possible. Now, the build that you see before you is, of course, the Maverick Hunter. This build is a character that I wrote in 2016 originally, and the goal behind it was that I wanted to make a character that was as close to the character Mega Man X from the Mega Man X series of games by Capcom. I mean, heck, you got the Mega Man vibes, you got the arm cannon, you got the Z-Saber sword, you got all that stuff going on. So I thought, hey, let's make it into a Dungeons & Dragons online character. It was good, and it was fun. It wasn't the best, for sure, when it first originally released and when I played it, but playing Battle Engineer, playing a melee, it was cool. I mean, realistically, the original goal was just to play a character that didn't use a repeating crossbow, as I didn't really fancy the noise. So getting into a character that doesn't really have to deal with the noise of a repeating crossbow, and instead just has this cool rotating set of rune arms that you switch through to get extra damage against enemies based on the different types, it felt really cool. However, the game is updated since 2016. Not only do we have the Renegade Master Maker tree, which did not exist at the time of the guide's initial inception, but we can also now incorporate strike-through. As previously, single weapon fighting was the only way to go for this type of character, but now with strike-through, it gives you the option to use a bastard sword or a dwarven war axe as an artificer and hit multiple monsters at a time. So for this rebuild, we are going to be swapping into a strike-through build using the two-handed fighting feats for an artificer while using a bastard sword. Now, there are a couple important caveats about this build. In the description, you'll be able to find a link to the original build, and you'll be able to find the changes that I wanted to make to the character, and it'll all be up to date, everything that you're going to see later in the video. But there's a big reason why we wanted to go with strike-through. You already need to have a 13 strength if you want to be able to take either dwarven war axe's bastard sword, because they're hand-and-a-half weapons. So if you want to use either of those two weapons, you do have to use a reasonable amount of strength. Now, normally you would spec out your balance to take single weapon fighting. However, for two-handed fighting, you need strength instead. And strength is a little bit harder to come by on a character than balance. Balance is a skill point, so it comes from your intelligence, and is pretty easy to max. Versus strength, well, you got to spend some ability points in there to get your strength. That's why for this type of character, I would recommend that if you happen to have some tomes kicking around, like a +2, then definitely follow around with this character build, and a +2 tome isn't too difficult to get. That's just getting 1750 favor, so even if it's a first life character, you can get the 1750 favor, get your +2 tome, and then use the Heart of Wood on a brand new character to just respec yourself into this proper build. If you don't happen to have a +2 tome handy, you're really going to be spreading your points thin with this type of character, so instead I would recommend don't go with the two-handed fighting route and still use a bastard sword, but then go with single weapon fighting. Now you might ask yourself, why wouldn't I use dwarven war axe when a dwarven war axe is a better weapon than a bastard sword? The reason for that is very simple. It's a themed build. I'm using bastard sword because, well, in the video game, X does not use a sword, he uses a sword. And since he is using a sword, I want to make sure I preserve that with the build. Yes, you can do it with a cosmetic, and if you are watching this video, then you can make the conscious decision yourself to use a Dwarven War Axe, which is a superior weapon because it has slightly more damage. But this build is going to use a Bastard Sword because that's the one that fits the most. Now, outside of this, I found the actual leveling process to be a breeze. For the most part, rune arms really do supplement your damage quite a bit, especially if you have any of the area of effect damage rune arms, such as Stranate's Hand Cannon, or Hand of the Tombs, or Chimera's Breath. Anything that does some type of frontal AoE where it just smashes a bunch of monsters right in front of you, it's super useful for clearing out packs. Strike through with your weapon, combined with your rune arm, allows you to just demolish groups of monsters. It's not quite as powerful as something like a sorcerer or an alchemist in terms of speed, however, it's consistent. I never really felt scared whenever I ran against a reaper or a large pack of monsters. They hit you and you just kind of heal yourself back up and keep fighting. Additionally, because you don't really cast your spells on anything other than pretty much buffing yourself at the beginning of a party and healing, you never really run out of spell points. And if you ever do need to shrine, there's always a couple extras you can use in a quest because you have so many different different opportunities for easy healing. This character's been a lot of fun so far, and I have just really enjoyed the weapon swapping ability of this character. Being able to swap to the right rune arm is also a very satisfying feeling. Suddenly engaging with a group of fire monsters and changing to a cold-based rune arm and firing off some shots just feels really, really good. Artificers are also really, really tanky, getting both tankiness from the Renegade Mastermaker tree, granting additional constitution, additional armor class, health, repair amplification, and repair spell power. But even still, the Battle Engineer tree also makes you quite tanky, allowing you to imbue your own armor, increasing the enhancement bonus of your armor, and getting even more physical resistance rating. Plus, since this character is a Warforged, you get to pick up adamantine plating, and if you have additional points, you can spend them in the Warforged tree if you want. It's important to note with this character that you actually don't need all of the racial points that I have. The most important things to this character happen to be in the Battle Engineer tree, the Renegade Mastermaker tree, and the Harper Agent tree. So if you are watching this build guide and you're like, oh man, I really want to play this, but I don't have X amount of racial points, that's okay. The Warforged tree is just supplementary points. It's not essential to the build. You can still play this build without any of that, which is great. Now, I quite enjoyed getting the opportunity to replay this character again. I was surprised by how strong it was during the leveling process. I would have thought that Artificer would have slowed down quite a bit in comparison to some of the new high-powered builds. And to be honest, slow is correct. It is a pretty slow build, but I would have thought that it might have had less success in terms of just clearing out monsters and raw damage, but I was pleasantly surprised. It's actually not too bad in terms of its clear speed and getting through things, and since it just doesn't die, it's a great pick for a soloing monster. Sure, there might be a trap or two that you have to get to the other side first before you can actually disable it, but thanks to your adamantine plating and lots of extra health from the Renegade Mastermaker tree, this character feels very tanky and can handle getting hit by a trap or two, especially if you don't know where it is. Really, one of the biggest weaknesses with this character is because you're a Warforged and your wisdom is so low, you're pretty much never going to have enough spot to actually know where traps are ahead of time, so you're usually going to take a hit from a trap, then back up, and then search for the box, as opposed to just seeing it ahead of time. Now, if you can get yourself some good spot items, you'll be in good hands, but it's a little bit tough. The big question is this character going to be the best thing at level 30? The answer to that question is no. No, it's not. It's probably better in pretty much all cases just to use the ranged version of an Artificer, using Inquisitive or something like that, in terms of endgame DPS. However, what this character can do is be pretty supportive, getting a lot of crowd control from the Renegade Mastermaker tree. It's alright, and I expect this character to be able to solo its way through Reaper 2 or 3 at level 30 once fully geared, not too badly. It'll be, again, a little bit slow, but it's not going to be the worst thing in the world. However, the single target damage is probably going to be this character's biggest weakness. While you want to focus on your spell power as much as you can to be able to do a lot of damage with your rune arms, that isn't always going to be a viable option for actually smashing through some of the monsters, since, well, you can't really focus on rune arm DCs. Rune arms are based off of evocation, and since you won't be able to get a lot of evocation DCs on your armor or your equipment, because you'll be focusing on all of your melee stats, it's going to make it a little bit difficult to get your rune arms to hit super duper hard. They will work, and they will deal damage. They just won't be as high as if you were playing some type of caster knockdown artificer like a pure Renegade Mastermaker or the like. Well, there definitely are some weaknesses with this character. I still enjoyed it and had a great time playing through with it, and I think you will too. If you'd like a really detailed explanation and guide, please check the description for the full write-up for this character, and if you want to hear me talk about it instead, just pay attention because I'm going to pass it over to Strimtom. Hunting down Mavericks is the name of the game with this character, and if you want to do that like I just did to this Maverick Warforged Titan right behind me, then look no further than the Maverick Hunter build, the Warforged Artificer that you see before you. Now, this character is a pure Artificer for a couple of different reasons. The first reason is there isn't too much of a benefit to gain from multi-classing that you would lose by deciding to do something else by comparison. This character uses rune arms specifically. That enhances your damage by a huge amount, and it is one of the core components of your character. So, since you want to make sure you're using your rune arms and doing as much damage as possible, you want to be pumping up those Artificer levels, because all rune arms scale off of Artificer level to deal their damage. So you don't really want to have any other multi-classes, because it will maybe give you some more damage on the physical side, but you will be losing out on some of the actual rune arm damage, and since it's kind of the theme to be kind of like a Mega Man X-style character shooting your arm cannon, 20 Artificer is where we go. Now, this character focuses primarily on intelligence as its main stat, constitution as a secondary. However, it is important to note you need strength for this build as well. I started with a base 15, and I used my tomes to give me the 17 that I needed to take all of the two-handed fighting feat line. I do not recommend playing this character build unless you happen to have a +2 tome. Don't do it. Not because you can't, but It's just you'll have to spend 17 points or put build points in or level up points into strength to get your strength to a 17 to be able to take all the two-handed fighting feat line. And it is much easier if you have tomes because you can actually max out your intelligence. So I highly recommend maybe play this as a second life character, get a +2 strength tome by getting 1750 favor, then building into this character. These are my stats at level 20. This is kind of the character that I leveled all the way through. It worked really well, so kind of go through some of the decisions that I made. As far as skills go, this character is an intelligence base, so you have access to pretty much every single skill in the game. For the most part, the ones that are most important, disable device is essential, as well as search and spot. Finding those traps, being able to, open or like disable the boxes and everything else. On top of that, open lock, again, another essential skill because you want to be able to open chests and doors for your party members. I also like to put points into jump. Artificers don't really have any natural way to give themselves increased jumping ability, and being able to jump high is really important in endgame content, so I like putting all my points into jump. That plus strength, plus greater heroism, and sometimes other buffs from other people should land you with a jump of around 30 at endgame, which is usually good enough, and there's somebody who might have jump in your party. As far as some of the other points, you got haggle. I like to take haggle to save some money. Balance is important. Bear in mind, you can play this character as single weapon fighting instead of two-handed fighting. You will just have less area of effect damage and possibly less single target damage because you won't be using your Bastard Sword or Dwarven War Axe as effectively to hit the monsters. However, if you do decide to go that route, then you don't need a strength of 17. You only need a strength of 13 to get Bastard Sword or Dwarven War Axe proficiency, which means as long as you're maxing out balance, you should be okay in that regard. But you don't need to max out balance if you don't decide to use either these single weapon fighting feats or any of them. And then after that, Spellcraft, Repair, pretty straightforward stuff. Get some more damage and get some more healing. And then use Magic Device. I also put points into Swim. You don't need points in Swim. I just like swimming fast, and that's why I did it. As far as the feats go, I pretty much followed the existing guide already. However, I made a couple little adjustments. Of course, all of the times in which you would take the single weapon fighting feats for this character build, instead you take the two-handed fighting feat line, because that makes the most sense. This character uses the new strike through, so I can actually hit the monsters, and so you want the two-handed fighting feat line. Other than that, the rest of the build is pretty straightforward. Take two-handed fighting. Make sure you're taking adamantine plating. I took adamantine plating at level 4 for my character to get the extra stats. From martial feats, you're going to be grabbing precision, improved critical slashing. Weapon focus slashing is good because you'll have a lot of bonus artificer feats where you can actually use that, so that's kind of essential. As far as metamagic feats go, you don't really need most of them. Quicken is nice because it lets you cast like quickened reconstructs and other spells, maybe even some buff spells. But accelerate is kind of what I went with here. Originally I had taken maximize, and I feel like maximize just doesn't really hit too many of your spells that you actually use. Sure, it hits one of your potion spells, so you can have like a little bit of an extra AoE heal, but I didn't feel like that was super necessary because the potions still heal a little bit, and you can cast 2 of them with your spell-like ability potions as well, so I went with Accelerate instead, which might find more use in the end game. But that's pretty much it for feats. As you do go up into the epics, in the description of this video, you'll be able to find a written guide that will go into that, but essentially, it's pretty, par for the course melee stuff. Overwhelming critical, perfect two-handed fighting, perfect two-weapon fighting, dire charge, and then Scion of Arborea. Basic stuff, very straightforward. No special stuff here. Now, as far as the actual spells go, this character, you get a lot of options for your spells. Pretty much as long as you have your repair, you can take whatever you want after that. I do recommend to make sure that at level 2, or your level 2 spells, you're grabbing insightful weapons. What's it called? Personal augmentation, insightful strikes. I forgot that it was called insightful strikes. And then at level 3, you want to be grabbing insightful damage. Now you can't cast both of these spells at the same time. You can't have intelligence to hit and intelligence to damage. However, out of the enhancement trees, that's where we solve this problem, because you use Harper Agent. You use Insightful Hit at first, and then once you hit level 6 and you get 3rd level spells, you get Insightful Strikes for damage, or the Insightful Damage here, and then you just take Insightful Hit Chance right here for Intelligence to Hit, Strategic Combat, and then for 3 points out of your enhancement tree, you suddenly have Intelligence to Hit and Damage, which is really, really nice. As far as the rest of your spells go, I like to make sure I've got some of the weapon enchantments, especially for the leveling process. The new Greater Elemental Weapons spell is really powerful for just adding a whole bunch of damage, especially if you don't play in Reaper mode. Outside of Reaper mode, this adds 3 extra d6s per hit, and 3 to 18 damage can actually be a lot. An average of like 10.5, that's pretty good. That's going to smash a lot of people. You'll notice I didn't really fill in some of these spell slots here. There aren't too many good spells for this. Another one I would recommend for your 6th level is probably be Tactical Detonation. And the first spell I used at the 6th level was not deadly spells, as though it looks like here. The first spell I put in was Reconstruct. Healing yourself is way better than getting a little bit of extra damage per hit. So this is kind of essential and will keep you alive. A couple important spells I want to talk about, though. Radiant Force Field is fantastic. You can cast this on yourself or someone else, and while it has a 3-minute cooldown, it reduces all damage that somebody takes by 25%, and this affects all damage types. This is not just monsters that are hitting you. Monsters hitting you, spells, non-resistible damage, all of it. It just reduces all the damage. It just gets everything. The only thing it doesn't reduce is untyped damage, so if you get ruined by something, you're kind of screwed, but even force damage gets reduced with the Radiant Force Field, which is really, really nice. Now, let's move on to the enhancement tree. What do you take here? Now, I personally have like a jillion racial points, but that's okay. You don't really need the racial points. The least important stuff is the Warforged tree. What matters is everything else in these these 3 trees: Battle Engineer, Renegade Mastermaker, and Harper Agent. Now, for this character, the way that I kind of spread my points around is I put some points in the Battle Engineer tree because I wanted to be able to get the second core infused weapons, so that way I could get a stable charge tier on my Rune Arm. Your Rune Arms, when they charge up and you have them in combat, when you fire them, they charge up to a tier of 5. So they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The Rune Arms, when you're moving, unfortunately, they lose their charge. However, with a stable charge tier of 2 and then a stable charge tier of 3, this now allows your Rune Arms to hold their charge even while moving, which means you can start out a fight with a charge tier of 3 instead of having to stop and wait for your whole thing to charge up, which is much more valuable. So I went with this charge tier 2 right away. Then I moved in the Renegade Mastermaker tree to pick up Mighty Slam. I only put 1 point in because I don't really care about how much damage this does. This character is all just about getting the stun and the crowd control effect. And on top of that, it's based off of your intelligence and your Sunder modifiers, which means that you are using Sunder, so you want to make sure you have like a Shatter item of some kind on your character. But since everything scales off of Sunder, you get the Shattered Defenses here, which is literally a Sunder effect, but it scales off of intelligence, which is nice. You have the stun, and then finally you have Thunder Shock Weapons, which is a trip and a knockdown. So that's really cool. Then around level 6, I made sure to spend 3 points to pick up Strategic Combat. I didn't take Know the Angles until way later. This is a very, very powerful ability as it gives you a insight bonus to your tactics DCs and damage of your hits. So it's awesome and it's something you want to keep up all the time. But for leveling, it's not really essential. It's good to have, but it's not essential. I went up to the tier 5 of the Battle Engineer tree as soon as I could. Once I got to level 12, Thunder Shock Weapon is amazing. It just knocks down everything in front of you. The trip lasts 12 seconds and has a cooldown of 12 seconds, which means when monsters get back up, boom, you knock them down. Monsters get back up, boom, you knock them down. So it's pretty sweet that way. You get some extra movement speed while charging your Rune Armor as well, so it just makes you feel good and you're running around and doing things and attacking the monsters. Now, when we move into the Renegade Mastermaker tree, there's a couple interesting things here. Number one, most of the stuff in here that you can get is really defensive. You've got each core giving you 10 hit points, so taking all 4 of these gives you 40 hit points. Then, since I am a Warforged, I love Repair Amp, and there's 20 Repair Amp right here. And on top of that, Constructive Conduit for another 30 Repair Amplification, giving you a lot of better ways to heal yourself than trying to cast potions like maybe a flesh-bound artificer would have to do. I also went high in for Embedded Component because it gives extra magic resistance rating and constitution, which is really nice. A lot of defensive stats. On top of that, I also decided to take the Armor Mastery for maximum dex bonus to your armor. My character uses Adamantine Plating, which gives you a max dex bonus of 2, but with the Armor Mastery here, that gives a maximum dexterity bonus of 5, which is actually pretty nice. On top of that, you also pick up the Constructive Conduit, which gives you another maximum dexterity bonus 2, so your total max dex bonus is 7, giving you the opportunity to build up to 7 points of dodge. Now, 7% dodge chance doesn't sound really good, but if I told you 7% of the time, instead of dying, you get to live, that sounds great. I get to live 7% of the time when I get hit by monsters? I love that, because it just happens, you know? So that's pretty good. On top of that, there's this other thing that was recommended to me by Twitch chat that I didn't even try until after I got to Epics. But this ability is really good, Kinetic Charge. Basically, the way that it works is every single time you strike a monster, you have a chance to build this charge stack, which gives you additional shield bonus to your armor class and also makes your character a little, it gives you a little bit of tankiness. However, you can discharge this ability by using the ability Kinetic Discharge, as the name sounds, once you have this turned on, and then all of a sudden, it makes it so monsters that take damage from your Kinetic Discharge are also slowed. slowed. The slow is 10% per stack, and if you're in a pack of monsters like I usually am, and on top of that you've got strike through, you just go boom, 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 boom. You've got full charges, and you just discharge them. Then you hit 3 more monsters, all of a sudden that's like 30 hits because you have 100% double strike, there's a bunch of monsters in front of you, you're back up to full charges of kinetic charge, so you don't have to worry about losing that armor class, and your character's really, really strong and really, really defensive because you can just slow down any monsters that actually want to get in your way. It's super cool, and I highly recommend you check it out and try to play around with this ability because it works really well. Now, not only that, because you get the armor class here, 3 armor class, 50% increased armor class from docents, and plus 6 armor class per stack of this for a total of 30 additional armor class, your character is going to have a ton of armor class and be really, really tanky. Expect this type of artificer build to achieve anywhere around 200 to 220 armor class. A lot of people think armor class doesn't do anything, but it actually does. That's pretty much going to make it so about half of attacks that come into you just straight up miss. So now we've got the 7% of the time you don't take damage, plus a 50% of the time you don't take damage, plus you get blurry for 20% of the time, plus you get incorporeality for 10% of the time. I don't know what the number is on that because I'm no mathematician, but if you add up all those numbers somehow using percentages and things, it's probably somewhere about 75% of the time you don't even take damage from attacks. And that sounds pretty cool. Not taking damage 75% of the time when people hit me. I love it. So that's essentially the build. As at any points you have left over, throw in the Warforged tree if you have any racial points or anything else. If you don't have any racial points, don't worry about it. You can still get the extra repair amplification and the strike through out of the tree, even if you have 0 racial points. So don't worry about not having any or not being able to spend anything in the tree. This is where you want to focus your points. Battle Engineer, Renegade Mastermaker, Harbor Agent first, Warforged tree last. As far as epic destinies, and if you want to go into epic, I would highly recommend using Legendary Dreadnought, just because this tree, a lot of people like Fury of the Wild or Fatesinger or other things, but the important thing about your character is that you're going to be constantly hitting monsters with this type of character because of the extra attack speed, and you have a lot of action boosts already built in, so you don't need to take the action boosts out of the tree. Plus, since you have so many action boosts, Combat Brute is super helpful to add additional damage to your character, so I would highly recommend using Legendary Dreadnought for this type of build. It's going to work out really well. You get a lot of tankiness, a lot of defensives, and one of my favorite abilities here, which is Thick Skinned, which reduces the damage you take by 25% from all sources. Again, just like your shield, your character is going to be really defensive. So highly recommend using Legendary Dreadnought for this type of character. As far as your twists, one twist you should always consider whenever you play any character that has the ability to stun is Sense Weakness. 30% additional helplessness damage is a lot of extra damage. So since I can stun with Mighty Blow and always stun targets, this is usually going to be pretty good. So just keep that in mind. Another ability that you kind of want to think about possibly is out of Shadow Dancer, Grim Precision. Your character doesn't get a lot of fortification bypass. In fact, oddly enough, Artificer gets no fortification bypass out of their tree, other than the fact that you can use Shattered Defenses to reduce the monster's fortification with a Sunder effect, which is fine, but it's not as much as some other classes get. So you will want to get some more fortification bypass. If you don't have enough, Grim Precision is a nice twist. However, if you do have enough fortification bypass, instead, Meld into Darkness makes you immune to physical damage because you have 100% concealment, or not concealment, enhancement bonus to dodge that ignores your dodge cap. So not dying for 15 seconds, that's pretty rad, and I highly, highly recommend it. After that, you have a couple different options. Out of Shadow Dancer, if you don't like equipping different items during quests to trap, you can grab Technician for a +6 Search Spot Disable and Open Lock, which is pretty cool. And then out of both Fatesinger, you can grab First Harmonic Chords for some extra hit and damage, or you can go into the Monk Tree, Grandmaster of Flowers, and pick up a Dance of Flowers if you want to do that as well. So these are all good options for twists. It's hard to say exactly what is the best. I'm probably not going to test out because I'm going to be reincarnating my character once I'm done talking. So that's pretty much it. That is, if you want to hunt Mavericks, you got to take down Magma Dragoon or Spark Mandrill or any of these guys that's running around, just like this one that's right behind me. This is exactly how you do it. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like that video, make sure you subscribe to the Strimtom channel, because apparently 34.7% of the people that watch are subscribed, which is not all of the people that watch. So make sure you think about it, hit that button. And if you really like seeing some of this stuff, I did this live on camera, this whole video spiel. This is all one take. So if you want to see that and see kind of, ask questions about builds as they come along, or even just know what's happening before it comes out, make sure to check out the live stream at twitch.tv/Strimtom. There'll be a link in the description, and also I'm going to put something on here that's visual so you can see it, because I'm a good video editor sometimes, but not usually. Anyways, I'm going to pass this off to future me to edit, and I'll see you guys later. Goodbye!